Hello and greetings everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and I really appreciate the time that you take to watch my videos. This time we will continue our series about Asatru and Pantheism, and in this video we will deal with the history of Pantheism. So we get a better idea how Pantheism works in the world, in cultures in general, and how it afflicted our religion Asatru. Now, the origins of pantheism are unknown. They date back into prehistory. All we know is that the very first written evidence we have about religion is one that already includes pantheistic thoughts and ideas. As said in the definitions video, pantheism is a quite modern word, and panentheism is even more modern, but the concepts, the ideas date back into prehistory. It's likely to assume, we can assume safely that the native tribes of Europe and Asia, from which our ancestors came forth, the Germanic people, already had pantheism. Why? Because many native societies and many native tribes that we know from more modern centuries and even today in South America, Africa, also express pantheistic ideas. And some more than others. Some cultures are very clearly pantheistic. Some religions have a very pantheistic view, and those are basically Stone Age-like societies. So it's safe to assume that our ancestors in the Stone Age also already had pantheistic ideas, at least quite some of them. Having said that, the first written evidence that you have is from the writer Ur, the first female writer in known history, who stems from the Sumerian people. And she wrote in her works that Ishtar and Inanna are one and the same god, that they are two faces of the same entity, and that this entity is the god that basically is the source for all the other gods, for the creation of the world, for everything else, and that everything that is basically just a branch off from this deity, from this oversoul. So the very first written evidence we have about religion already talks about pantheism. The Assyrians even had a goddess that was clearly pantheistic and even worshipped as the pantheistic over-god, as the goddess behind the gods, as the creature behind creation. It is called, this goddess was called Nisaba. Look it up. The Assyrians were very influential to, let's say, most of mankind, and they had a pantheistic goddess, clearly. But it continues. We have written evidence in the Bhagavad Gita, the, let's say, oldest really religious text of mankind. I think it was written 6,000 years ago, or was it even 8,000 years ago? It was quite a long time in Vedic script. And its content is also very pantheistic. Indeed, if you look at Hinduism today, it is still very pantheistic. But let's begin with the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, there are two deities that are called Mahadevi. What does that mean? Mahadevi translate as great God, or as huge God, as the big God, as the God. And those two are Brahman and Shakti. Now, if you know a bit about Hinduism, you see that Brahman is easily identifiable as the god behind everything else. Brahman often is intermixed with other gods. He often takes the role of other gods. In the pantheon, he is the one who watches over creation, but is sometimes also said to have created everything, which is actually more the place of Vishnu, but the two often are said to be just two faces of the same god. And there is, of course, Shiva, the destroyer, who is also said to be just another face of Brahman, so that Brahman actually is the creator of the world, the one who watches over the world, and the one who destroys the world, and that Vishnu and Shiva are just two different aspects of Brahman. This becomes clear in quite some tales about Brahman in the Bhagavad Gita. As example, there is this one tale where Brahman splits himself into 1,000 individual beings with 1,000 personalities. All of them are Brahman. All of those 1,000 people are Brahman. Every single one of them is Brahman. And he did that because he himself alone wasn't able to help a group of people in time in just one body. So he split up and took on the forms of 1,000 people in order to help others. And that is a very pantheistic statement. One God is splitting up into 1,000 separate individual personalities and acts as all of them. And all of them are the same being in the end. To give you a kind of bad comparison, you yourself do a similar thing. You behave very differently at home than you do at work. You are, let's say, Lieutenant John Doe is not only lieutenant in the military, he is also a husband, he is also a father, he is a friend. He is maybe a worker somewhere else. He is a traveler, he is a tourist, he is so many things and still one and the same person, although in each of those roles he behaves differently. Now the difference is that Brahman actually split up in different bodies, which we do not do. But yet, as I said in the first video of this series, we have individual cells, fingers and such, and all of those move because we want them to. And while they each are separate individual beings, or better said the cells, they still act on command of the greater mind behind them. And that's really the idea about pantheism in Hinduism. I hope you can still follow me. The interesting thing is that in modern Hinduism, this phenomenon is very well known, and most mystics and yogi of Hinduism are pantheists, while the average Hindu may actually be a polytheist and do not believe or not much believe in pantheism. The ones initiated into the religion, the yogis, are by far the most are pantheists, and they believe in pantheistic ideals and in pantheism in general. In special, if you look at Raja Yoga or Jnana Yoga, I hope I didn't butcher that pronunciation too much, they are basically pantheists. And the pantheistic idea is the whole concept of karma, of what you do to someone else will finally come back at you, because you are connected with these other beings. You are connected to them. The whole reincarnation theme, which I will make videos about too, bases on the idea that you are divine, that you are immortal, that in the end you are many different people, just not at the same time, but at different points in time. You are just separated by time from each of your own beings. And that idea of reincarnation is that really you just come closer to the divine source, and that gods are no different than mortals, just that they have more experience and thus are closer to the divine source. Also, the end of the cycle is not eternal nothingness or eternal death. That would be quite funny to try to achieve that. It's really that you come so close to the divine source that there is no more need to reincarnate, that you can bathe in this divine light, that you can be divine, that you become a god, just like Krishna did. That you become a god by coming closer to this divine source, by purifying yourself from the not so divine stuff in your personalities. That's the idea behind that. Now, is this only in Hinduism? Of course not. We have many other polytheistic religions that are actually pantheistic, or at least have pantheistic cults inside them, or clearly express pantheistic ideals and views. One good example would be the cult of Diana in Rome, of Diana in Greece and Demeter in Rome, or the Egyptian Isis cult. Actually, Egypt gave birth to monotheism, and monotheism of Echnaton bases on the pantheistic idea of the early Egyptian people that basically Ra and Isis are just two different aspects of one and the same being. Ra being the creator outside of creation, while Isis being the creation itself. It was quite popular actually, and later led to Ra splitting up as the concept of monotheism, and Isis being the, let's say, creation itself. In ancient Egypt, we have temples dedicated to Isis, where the inscriptions clearly tell us about pantheistic ideas. To give you some examples, well, you know what, we will start with the Romano-Greco ones. Socrates, as example, said in his work Plato's Phaedrus, I quote, "There was a time when the joyful saw a great beauty and got initiated. We, who are the same as Zeus and the gods, who are calm and joyful and shine in divine light." Socrates said basically that humans are the same as gods. Now we could interpret that Socrates meant that humans and gods are on the completely same level, which apparently is not the case. And we can be fairly sure to when we assume that Socrates did not believe that humans were just as powerful as gods or just as immortal as gods. So what did he mean? He meant that on an ultimate level, humans also are divine, also have the divine spark, have this thing that lives on even in the afterworld. Just like in Asatru, the Greeks believed that the soul of the human continues after his body died. Now, what is this thing that continues? It actually goes into the realm of the gods. It could go to Olympus, but more often it would go to Hades. And in Hades there are very different realms, from hell-like realms to the Elysian fields, which are basically paradise for Christians. And that the soul continues there, lives on there, free from all the problems of the lifetime. So there is this divine thing in humans that makes them akin to the gods, which makes them related to the gods, and basically which allows them to enter the realm of the gods. So gods are basically just like humans with much more power and experience, but they are no better in that term than humans are. They are just different with more experience, just like parents are not better than their children. They just have more experience and more power and more knowledge. But even humans can go there, which is presented in quite some stories. But Socrates, of course, is not the only source. The Roman Mark Aurel, or Marcus Aurelius, stated that there are four ways to experience the gods: wonders or miracles, visions, dreams, and initiation. And what did he say about initiation? He said that the faithful that the faithful is like the gods. He is connected to the same divine source. That this divine source is what makes gods and humans basically the same, which allows humans to reach divinity, which allows humans to become godlike. And this philosophy was the whole idea behind the later God Caesars, you know, these people who thought of themselves as being sons of the god Jupiter or other gods, and thus they claimed the right to rule because they are akin to these gods. Now, they didn't actually think that they were the sons of these gods, like, Jupiter had sex with their mom and they came out. No, they believed that they are connected to the gods by being godlike themselves, by being close to this divine source. And that meant that they are close to the pantheon, and that their soul is so close to the gods that it can communicate between humans and the gods, that they actually can influence the gods and reach the gods because they are just divine enough to be able to communicate with gods as a god. And that's the idea behind that. Cicero even said about the Demeter cult, and I quote here, or better said, I quote the translations, I'm not going to read it in Latin. Athens gifted the world with holy initiation into the mystery that we, as humans, too, are like the gods, share the same divineness, not in power, but in divinity, which lets us to live happier, suffer through hardships easier, and approach death with hope. Now, that is quite a pantheistic view, don't you think? I think so, because what Cicero is saying here is that humans and gods sprang from the very same source, and that basically gods are no better than humans, they are just closer to the source, they are older, they have more experience, but that's it. They are not born with superpower that humans can never ever reach. They are not born as gods, they become gods over evolution, over time, over learning, or maybe even because they never got separated so far from the source as humans, but in the end, humans can just be as divine as the gods, maybe not in the same degree of power, but in the same degree of worth. Just like inside the pantheon, not all gods that were deemed gods and worshipped as gods were the same in power like Jupiter or Ares, Mars, I mean in the Latin pantheon. The Romans had gods that were responsible for sewers, for the toilet, for a house, and still those things were deemed as gods. Now, of course, the god of sewers has a very different responsibility and very different powers than Jupiter, yet this god of sewers was just as much a god as Jupiter, was just as divine as Jupiter. And of course, if a god of sewers can be divine, surely a human can also be divine on some level. Same goes for the Greek people, of course. In the temple of Demeter, we even have an inscription, and I quote again, this inscription said, "Through knowledge of the mysteries, death is no more a danger to the living, but a blessing that leads to union with the gods." Which basically means if you die and are divine enough, you will join the gods, you will join the ranks, you will be in union with them, you will maybe not become the next Jupiter or something, but you will be able to reach their realms, you will be able to speak with them, commune with them, just like children do with their parents. You may move into Jupiter's house and live with him, although you're not the same in power, but you're just still related to the gods. Plutarch has maybe brought the best evidence when he wrote about the Egyptian goddess Neith and the temple of her that, well, the temple was destroyed, so we don't know if what Plutarch wrote actually was inscribed in the temple's doors, but according to Plutarch, in his time, this temple was huge and magnificent and had the following inscription on its doors. Listen closely, I quote here. "I am all that is, all that ever has been, all that ever will be. No mortal has seen more than I have." And I haven't heard a more clearly pantheistic view of any goddess in the Romano-Grecan pantheon or Egyptian pantheon than this statement about the goddess Neith. She even says that she is all that is, was, and ever will be. That is pantheistic. Neith is this divine source that we spoke about. And that's not the last one. We also have Apuleius, a Greek initiate, who lived in the 2nd century AD, and he said that he was initiated with the words that Isis is the true god behind all gods, the goddess who wears the other gods' personalities like actors in a Greek play wear masks to express different roles. So this goddess, Isis, is basically an actor playing the other gods, wearing their personalities, acting their roles, but ultimately commanding them, because all of them are ultimately the same being, Isis, and that Isis is the one responsible for the actions of the different gods, as they are at least connected to Isis if they aren't Isis herself in different outfits. And this guy, Apuleius, later wrote the very same thing about Demeter, and he created a prayer that I'm going to read. Again, I quote, "All creating, all being, who encompasses everything, ever present, who tells creation," maybe who commands creation is a better translation, "firstborn, eternal, who knows all as you are all, I pray to you." And that is a very pantheistic prayer. He clearly addresses his prayer to this divine source, to this thing that is everything. Now, all of those ideas, even poured into the medieval times, and in modern times as well, maybe not so much in Christianity, but actually in the form of esoterics, in the form of Gnosticism, in the form of Hermetics or occultism. We see that in works like the Tabula Smaragdina or the Kybalion, or in modern day philosophies of various orders of occultism like the Golden Dawn, who clearly state that there is this divine source, that every human and indeed every animal, every plant has this divine spark inside, and that this divine spark is the same for every being. It is not the same divine spark, but that all divine sparks are at the same level of worth, that they are all divine, that they are all connected to this ultimate divine source, that gods or higher beings of any kind just have more understanding of this. They just have realized this divine spark inside themselves more than the not so evolutionary advanced beings have. They simply got closer to the source. Now, to some degree we have a similar view in Christianity, but that is worth its own video. And I think I'm rambling too much. What I want to mention is that this idea of pantheism is not only found in Europe, it's also found in Asia, like Lao Tse had quite some statements in his works that were clearly pantheistic, and through which we can identify Lao Tse as a pantheist. But it's, as said, also known to cultures of native populations all over the planet. And it really seems that pantheism is a shared view of pretty much all cultures out there, to some degree even in monotheism, but we will speak about that another time. I thank you for watching, and I hope you were able to follow me, even though my rambling got a bit out of hand and my English ain't the best. So have a nice day. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.